Hello, everyone. My name is Boby Yazi. I am so proud to be part of the C.R.I.E.S Conquered movement. C.R.I.E.S Conquered it is a movement all about bringing awareness and solutions on related to culture, race, inequity, equality, and sexism that are driving high rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide among Gen Z. Hello. Hi. Hi. Good to have you. So today I am joined by two amazing young people who are doing amazing work with Elisha and Elyssa. Thanks so much for joining. So please tell me a bit about yourselves.
Thank you so much. We're delighted to be here. You want to start, Elyssa? Sure. So I'm Elyssa. I'm 16 years old, and my sister Elisha and I started our business Holy Art when we were 9 and 10, yes. Right? Yeah. Feels like just yesterday. Yeah. Well, I'm Elisha. I'm 17 years old. We're artists. We're also public speakers and authors. We published our first book, I Love Me, Self-Esteem in 7 Easy Steps for Kids when we were 11 and 12. So we've always been involved in the community. I'm really passionate about our craft, writing, but also art. Since we paint, we play the guitar, the piano, and we just love getting involved in community things. And also with the C.R.I.E.S Conquered movement, speaking about all these important and time-relative topics.
Well, thanks so much for that introduction. Certainly when I was your age, I'm 21, but certainly when I was your age, I wasn't doing such cool things. So very interesting. Thanks so much for doing this. So Elyssa, the first question's for you. You joined the C.R.I.E.S Conquered movement because you were concerned about the issues of discrimination and hate, especially racism, xenophobia, and homophobia. Could you tell us more about that, please?
Absolutely. I would love to. So those topics are all very close to me because I am Latina. I'm actually Afro-Latina. My mom is from the Caribbean, the Dominican Republic. So I'm very mixed. There's African, there's Spanish. There's also from the native island. And of course, my family from here in the US is from Portugal. So there's a lot going on there. And all my life, I've kind of dealt with that initial reaction. Like, where are you from? You're obviously not from here because you don't look white. And it's actually been really interesting seeing the contrast between my older sister and I, since she has more typical features for here and I don't. Sometimes my mom, who looks Latina, will get comments saying how I look so much like her, and she doesn't. Yeah. And it's crazy because we actually both look very similar. But for people who have that lens of racism, it's completely different for them. But also with homophobia and xenophobia, my mom is an immigrant, and so she's dealt with so much discrimination because of not being originally from here, being from a different country. And so that's really important to me that people don't have to struggle with that. And I have so many friends who are in the LGBTQ community, and I know that that's a really important subject to me because it's really something that I'm passionate about is making sure that people are not discriminated against for anything. The only thing that we should be judging people on are their actual actions and not, who they love, where they're from, what languages they speak, and how they look.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. And before we dig deeper into the issues and what you're doing and the beautiful stories that you and your moms have, Elyssa, would you mind to give an introduction as well, please?
Me? Did you mean Elyssa?
I might have mistaken the names. I apologize. Elisha.
Yes. Yeah, of course. Well, to add to that conversation, discrimination and hate based issues is really close to my heart as well. Being biracial and not quite looking the part on either end, it's a very unique, tiny sliver of a community that we have because we talk different when you compare us to our Hispanic side and also when you compare us to the other side from the US. So I have dealt with some discrimination because of that. I'm going to college in the fall, and a couple people have actually attributed my being part Latina to the reason why I got accepted into college. And that feels very invalidating to me of the hard work that I've done to get to this place. And as a first generation student in the US, it's a whole different perspective knowing those differences between privilege, because I do have a lot of privilege myself since I am white passing sometimes. But just knowing and seeing my friends and see how better they get treated versus friends that I have who are African American or Hispanic, or that they're in the LGBTQ community. They get judged on even the most basic mistakes or the basic things that they do in life, when other people don't, simply because of the way they look or the way they were raised or how they carry themselves, really. So I think it's unfair. And I am definitely an advocate for change, and I'm being a part of lots of different movements for social justice when it comes to politics, but also just different social reforms that need to happen.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. And the second question, Elisha, you say that as a woman of mixed heritage, you've dealt with a lot of racism, bullying, and insecurities about who you are and where you come from. You say that you're passionate about building self-esteem and empowering others. Could you tell more about how you're doing that, how you're building self-esteem and empowering others?
Yeah, of course. So I mentioned that Elyssa and I published our book, I Love Me, when we were 11 and 12. We began that process of writing the book because I was bullied in private school. So we live in Texas now, but we used to live in Florida. And really, I got discriminated a lot because of how I look, but also because of having a Hispanic mom that is single, because she was a single mom for 8 years with us. So that was also very difficult for me. And I started having difficulty accepting and loving myself, those difficulties with self-worth. And really, it was just not having enough representation, I think, because I didn't see many people in the community, but even in media, that were like me, that had a single parent household, that had a family that didn't all look the same. And having people who are bilingual, multilingual, people having family across the ocean, really.
Yeah.
I didn't see that a lot in my in the media that I was consuming, or even in our community, since it was mostly older people and a very wealthy community, which we weren't a part of that. So it was a different contrast. I will say, though, that I've always appreciated the amount of dedication my mom has had to give us the best education. After I went through that whole situation with bullying and everything, our mom actually pulled us out of school to homeschool us. So she initially put us into the private school because she said, you know what, my kids, they're going to get the best start, and education is power. She has always told us that, la educación es poder. And if you can tap into that, then you can change your entire life. So once we realized that that wasn't really working out with our different learning styles, and also not fully being accepted or embraced in the community, she decided to take matters into her own hands, and we have been homeschooled ever since. So I graduated at 16 from high school, and I've just been able to get ahead of the curve in so many things, which I'm grateful for, but also know deeply that this is because of my heritage. And if it weren't for my mom's dedication as an immigrant and my entire family's dedication coming from various different backgrounds, then I wouldn't have been able to get to where I am today. And another thing that we're doing in the community is that we host talks every week trying to uplift people. We speak on our blog about all these topics as well. And for myself personally, there are more books to come from me speaking about bullying, since I think it's a very important topic for the youth of today, especially because that's really where all the prejudices start, in my opinion. It starts when we're young, when we're surrounded by people who only look like us, think like us, act like us. We don't get stronger as a person, we get weaker as a person. And that allows us to be blinded by all these different beliefs and biases, which is really helpful that I've also been surrounded by a variety of people. And I've been able to strengthen my personality and be more grounded in what I believe in.
Well, thank you so much for being advocates. Absolutely. So I'm really interested to hear more about what you're doing. Essentially, like you said, the blog, you said the hosting guests, like speaking events online. So how did you all start it? How did you start at such a young age?
Well, our mom has always been a huge example for us in that sense of the way, in every sense of the way, but especially with being involved members of the community and making sure that our voices are heard. And I'm really grateful for that. She's always been active on social media. She has her own blog, The Positive Mom, and she always tries to uplift other moms, especially single moms. And so when we saw, the amazing work that she was doing with other moms, we decided, what if we did this for kids? Because we know that we have a lot of privilege because we have our mom who supports us, who teaches us the right thing. But we also know, and we have to acknowledge, that there are many kids that don't have that kind of support and don't have that kind of guidance. And so that's how we started our company, Holy Art, because we wanted to express ourselves through art, but also have whole values, and teach that to other young people. And especially now, we're trying to focus on tweens and teens, because at this time, it's so important that we have the support that we need as young adults.
Yeah, like Elyssa said, it all started with her mom. Really, our whole journey with blogging started when we were 5 and 6. That's when we started our first YouTube channels that we had us separately, focusing on different topics. But just knowing our mom has been really a pioneer in the digital platform. She started working with HTML and coding and JavaScript and all those wonderful things very early on in the process, in late 1990s, early thousands. And so she's been on the blogging platform for, 17 years. And she's just had a wealth of knowledge that she's passed on to us. And it's really helped that whenever we ask questions and we're curious about things, she answers us. So I would say that's something that every parent or a person who has younger people they mentor can take into their lives, is that if they ask questions, answer them. Because our younger sister, Eliana, she's 6. She's already starting to do videos and be active. And when she asks questions about, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement, our mom doesn't shun or turn her away. She explains things in a way she can understand it, so that she can start creating those positive beliefs early on, and also be aware of what's happening in the world. Because I believe that there are so many kids and teens out there that don't really know what's going on, and they let themselves be swayed by what their parents think or by what their friends think, but they're not really educated on what's actually going on, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. So I believe that that's really where it all starts, is making sure that you are allowing kids and teens the ability to be creative, to be open, and to look at different perspectives from all sides, and then come out with your own conclusion and your own truth and your own conviction about that. So our mom has already done that our entire lives, really involved us in those important conversations step by step and guiding us through it, so we could really form our own beliefs and know what to say when people ask us or challenge us, or when we're faced with people who don't believe the same things we do.
I love that you said that, and I'm just going to piggyback off of that for a few minutes here. I'm very passionate about this subject. I think that anybody who is older than anybody, so all of us, we all have people that are younger than us that are looking up to us. Babies look up to 5-year-olds, 5-year-olds look up to 10-year-olds, and all walks of life. We all have somebody that's going to be looking to us to see, what are they doing and how can I do that? And peer pressure and the people that you surround yourselves with is such a powerful influence, especially now, I think. Especially now that we're all kind of disconnected from each other. Everybody's looking more to social media, what their friends and family are doing, or even complete strangers. So it's super important to always be a good example, always be thinking, would I want younger people to be doing the same things that I'm doing, and thinking about that impact that you make, because everybody matters when it comes to this. Every little social media post, every little word, every interaction that you have, it really does matter.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm just trying to take everything in, and it's just like, you're so wise. You two are so wise.
Thank you.
I'm just taking everything in and trying to process it, and definitely will take some stuff and watch the video again to learn more. But there was a great segue to the next question, which is, To both of you, what are your views about the Black Lives Matter movement, and do you think we will see any positive change moving forward, like genuine, sustainable change moving forward?
So I would love to start on this. Is that okay?
Of course.
Okay. So I think that we already have seen positive change, definitely. There's a quote, and I think it was Will Smith that said this. Racism isn't getting worse, it's getting filmed. And so the fact that it is getting filmed, that we're actually seeing the impact that racism has now, is a huge deal. And I think that we should consider that a win. Because before, of course, racism was present, but it was very, very hidden. And if it wasn't hidden, then it was completely accepted. It was a normal thing. No one was shouting about it. No one was rioting. Everyone was like, you know what, this is fine. But now people are really taking a stand, and people are filming it. People are talking about it, tweeting about it, posting about it, telling their friends about it. And I think that that is amazing. And of course, there is room for change, because there are still brutal killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, so many people that we've lost. And that is just heartbreaking to me and to so many people. To all of us, really. It should be that way for all of us. It should be heartbreaking to all of us. And it's really sad that for some people it doesn't make that much of an impact. But we've been seeing so many changes lately. So many brands reaching out, and some police forces have been impacted by this. And so I think that we need to keep on going, because there will always be people who are saying, you know what, you already had your victory. It's time to stop rioting. It's time to stop posting about it. You already won. But I say, no, we have not had our final victory yet. Our final victory will be that equality and inclusion will not be something to add at the end because somebody got hurt. It will be something that has always been there, that isn't questioned. That human rights and love and safety for everybody is never something that we need to be worried about.
Yeah, of course. And to add my thoughts to that, the Black Lives Matter movement, it's been a movement that has been going on for centuries, really. But really right now, especially with the mass publicizing of everything on social media, because of the quarantine and the coronavirus situation, I think we're definitely seeing a change. And because everyone is flocking to social media, people can't ignore it anymore. And if they're ignoring it, it's because they're choosing that. And I have heard of like so many different people that just now white families are actually taking the time to talk about racism with their kids. And I know some of these families, and it really shocks me on the other side, because I'm like, have you not had this conversation from the beginning? It's really important and really vital, because if you don't have the conversation, you're really setting your child up for failure, and other children up for failure as well. And I believe that Black Lives Matter, and that there should be no question about it, really. And people who are saying that all lives matter, they don't see the point, because of course all lives matter, but Black lives have been under attack for years and years, and no one has done much about it. Right now, we are seeing positive change. Like we know that George Floyd's killer got convicted and everything, but still there are so many things that need to be done out there. There are so many people that need to be questioned, that need to be held accountable. Really, accountability is the important thing. And I think that is really going to be the key for change, is once people start being held accountable and start knowing that there are consequences for their action. All this time, people were able to get away with things, especially people in law enforcement. There are so many cases with things being covered up or hidden to protect the majority or the more privileged person. But that's wrong. It's just an injustice. And I believe the cry out right now, is that we should be saying their names: George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Elijah McClain, everyone who has been unrighteously and unjustly slaughtered. It's our debt to them to pay it forward, to speak up about it, and to do something. There are so many young girls and young boys, African-American boys and girls, that deserve to live in a world where they don't have to be worried about just simply going out for a walk or going to the store. They deserve to be heard. And something else I'll say is that as Latinas, both of us, even though we are considered an underrepresented group, we will never know what it is like to be an African American in this country. It's an unmatched,
Absolutely.
There's no comparison. And I think that we've got to start talking about it. And that's really the most important thing, is starting these conversations early, doing something, signing petitions, talking about it on the media. Just today, I was interviewing the Dallas County Sheriff, Marion Brown, talking to her about the Black Lives Matter movement, because we've got to realize that there are people out there advocating, but we've got to support them as well. Those people who are in positions of power that are able to change the narrative and that are able to make a difference out there. And also being able to not being scared of saying something on social media about it. There are so many people that are frightened to take a stance, but really it's cowardice, really. That's what it is, because you've got to say something. If you're not willing to say something and you're just moving on like life is fine, then what does that say about you? And something else that I saw this somewhere, that someone posted this, is that, when the generation of today now, like everyone who's in their teens, early 20s, 30s, when they have kids or grandkids, they're going to be asking us what we were doing when all this is happening. What are we going to be able to say? Are we going to say that we made an impact, that we stood up for our beliefs, that we helped other people? Or are we going to say that we were too scared and weren't able to make a difference willingly? So I think that's really an important thing to think about.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. This is it's not as good of a question as before, but economists are predicting that Generation Z and millennials will suffer from one of the greatest economic hardship from the COVID-19 pandemic, which will rob us of career-defining education employment opportunities. So you're both students. What are your greatest concerns related to education and employment opportunities for our generation?
Well, when it comes to education, I think that this is changing the narrative for education quite a bit. I mentioned that I'll be going to college in the fall, and my university decided to move forward with a hybrid. So we're doing some in-person classes and some classes online. But many universities have decided to do fully online. So I think my main concern with education is just finding the balance of mental health, physical wellness, being able to prioritize, and basically finding time for everything. Because the online world is great, yes, but it can also be very taxing emotionally and mentally, and it can be a lot to handle. And sometimes you want to take a break from that, but when your whole life is on the web, it's kind of difficult to take that step back and say, I've got to step away. So when we have friends that during their last semester of school, they were having to be like 9, 10, 12 hours a day on the computer, in front of the computer. A few of our friends even had to wear uniform on camera the entire day. And it's really crazy, but obviously it's very necessary because of the measures that are being taken right now. But I think it would be important to just know that balance, really have that ability to say, I need to step back from this. And also just the change that this is going to bring to jobs, because there are so many jobs that have had to switch to online. For myself personally, I edit and do graphic design and illustrate, and that's my business. So I've been able to take that forward because I do it all online anyways. So all my meetings are online. They were online before the pandemic. They will be online after the pandemic. So I have seen some pushback from working with brands and other people who are trying to be ethical about the situation, because obviously, like I said, we've got to be sensitive to the topics that are happening right now. So sometimes I've had to think, well, I've got to take a pause on posting this or on publicizing this, just to allow some time for people to heal, to internalize what's going on, and to work through it. Because I think it is unfair to push content on people when they're not ready for it, and to we got to think about these time sensitive topics, really.
Know when you have to put a spotlight on something else.
Yeah, of course. So I have lost some work because of that, but for the majority of the part, it's been virtually untouched, my work that I've been doing. But I do feel worried for students that are working very low income jobs, that they can barely support themselves and everything is very slow right now. There are so many people that are just scrambling to get work wherever they can because they don't know where to turn to and they don't have other skills that they can bring to the table. So I'd say that's another thing that I would like to see some change on, is educating students and giving them the tools they need to develop further skills that they can use that will help them. Because for myself, I have my freelancing that I do. I have our main business and I have lots of connections. Other students and our friends, they don't have that. They don't know what to do. So they're stuck really in what they're doing in their time loop. And they're stuck in that mindset that they can only commit to one thing, when really there's an infinite amount of possibilities out there. So I'd say that's something I would like to see change, is that students are offered those resources and they're given the opportunity to learn more so that they can help themselves and also help their families.
Thank you. And I agree with that. My own take on the economy is that we're in a really unique time right now, because we have the amazing opportunity to see how everything is when it's shaken up completely. Our worlds have been turned upside down and everything is changing. It's crazy. And so I think that this really gives us the unique opportunity to see what everything is like under a different perspective, because we already knew that our school system was flawed and we already knew that our job system was flawed. But this has really been kind of uncovering what is really wrong with the system and how that needs to change. I think that especially with essential workers, we've been able to see how the hours and the conditions are just really unsafe sometimes.
Yeah.
And that really needs to change. But I think that before, people weren't directly impacted by that, and so they couldn't see it. And so I think that we need to take this situation as a learning opportunity to see how we can be more sensitive to what people need, not have people working or doing school all the time, really being flexible and making everything more accessible. Because something that really, really shocked me was that before, college was almost never an option to take it online. Very select, few opportunities. But as soon as the pandemic hit, what were colleges saying? They weren't saying let's shut down. They were saying let's move it to virtual. So when it really does matter to these businesses and these colleges, these institutions, they can make it more accessible for the public, but they choose not to. And I think that that is such an eye-opening experience for us all, because it means that if we're actually pushing for these changes to happen, they are going to happen. They are going to make it more accessible, but we need to be louder and we need to make it known that what we want and how it can be made possible. As for jobs, I do think that it has been very unstable. But I think that this will kind of create a push to not make it so hard to get a job, because before you needed a degree and it was really set up in a way where there was so much privilege involved in getting a good, stable job that isn't the minimum income. So I'm really excited to see what comes out of this. I think that we've seen so much collaboration, so many changes being made that are actually sustainable and safer and really helping the mental health of people. And so I'd love to see more of that.
Thank you for that thoughtful analysis of the question I asked. Absolutely. I'm going to reflect on this conversation so much, but a follow-up question is that you both mentioned systematic issues, obviously in how our criminal justice system works, but also our education and the lack of accessibility. So you mentioned, Elyssa, you mentioned that colleges can take the chance, can make it more accessible. They don't want to. They don't do it. It's a personal choice. So as students, I'm going to be a college sophomore next year. How can members of the class of 2023 in the next couple of years make sure that colleges make it a point to make classes more accessible to students?
Okay, I love that question. And I think that we segued perfectly into that. So I think the biggest thing is really just making it known that that is something that you want. Because before, I feel like everybody was in that state of mind, like it's not going to happen. They've already said that it won't work. And so we don't need to open that discussion up more. But now that colleges are seeing, the actual need that there is, and people have been saying, we can't just not go to college. We need an actual solution here. And that's why we've seen such a big change. All these, how do you say all of the experiences being translated to online. So I think speaking to the people in power is the biggest thing, because that pressure really creates change.
Yeah, and it can be very intimidating to go and pressure someone to do something, but that's really the only way things have worked in this society and in this culture, is that pressure is really the thing that gets people to make change happen.
Yeah.
So I think another thing that's important for people who are in college now and want to see those reforms is to find allies, to find people who you can rely on, that you can band together and really create some important and lasting conversations, to speak to the people in power, to post about it, because believe it or not, colleges have social media pages and they also check them all the time. So really, we have all our info there at our fingertips of what we can do to contact people. It's just really up to us to contact them and find those communities, those safe spaces where we know people will agree, where we know people will support us, and where we can band together and find out a good way to make it happen.
Yeah. And social media, I love that you mentioned that, because it's a huge tool. Now that we have social media, everything is kind of irreversible that goes on social media. And so if we bring our voices there, we're pretty much unignorable. And we have so much power in that, because we can tag brands, we can tag colleges, organizations, really make sure that we're seen. Reputation is something that really matters to the people in power. And so as long as we're going for that, I think that we're going to see some great change. And pressure never has to be violent, but it does have to be, founded in your own beliefs. You do have to take a stand. Yeah.
Absolutely perfect. So petitions and grilling the people in charge, making sure pretty much that's the solution. Absolutely, with pressure. And one last question about the education system and how young people can make sure there's sustainable change, in particular in the campuses. So, Elisha, you're going to be a college freshman next year, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So, based on what you've said, based on what both of you have said, you're very thoughtful, very, very analytic. You have a 15, 20-year-old plan that you have in your head that you're working towards. So what are some projects, or what are some ideas that you want to start working on, like you have in your mind going into college next year, whether in person or online?
Yeah, of course. So I actually joined the Hispanic organization in my college. So speaking to everything that we've talked about so far, the Black Lives Matter movement, racism, discrimination, bullying, and also the education system, there's a very small percentage of people of color at the university that I'm going to attend. So I feel like that's the perfect opportunity for me to rise up and say something about it. I'm not afraid to speak out and say things to other people, but other people might, unless there's someone on their side who already takes that first step. So I'm already planning on doing that in the organization that I'm involved in. I want to be able to bring awareness to issues that are going on, and discrimination, racism, and also changing the narrative around education. Because like I mentioned, people like to attribute people of color's success to the fact that they are of color. That's the reason why we got into college, or that's the reason why we're being successful. Yes. But I think that we need to call it out and call it what it is, really. And as for things being online or social reform with whether it's hours that students have to put in or different calls like unfairness in the workplace and unfairness when it comes to grading, which has happened a lot with people of color versus white people as well. I think it's really just not being afraid to take a stand on it and being like, okay, you know what, this is wrong, it needs to change. And I'm willing to do that and go all the way with that when I'm in college, and also be able to be a voice for the voiceless, because there are so many people that are less privileged than I am. And I feel like as the bridge between my two races, I can really help to be a segue for justice.
Absolutely perfect. Sorry, my mic was muted. And Elyssa, would you like to add anything else about high schools in specific? Like for our viewers in high school that are watching this, like what can they do?
So I think that being prepared is the biggest thing, because like Elisha said, you know, college is a huge new experience for you. And I've really been able to see how she's preparing to make a difference in college and make my own plans based off of that. So people who are going into college can always lend a hand to the younger generation. And people already in college, like yourself, can really help high schoolers and college freshmen to see how they can make a difference. Because whenever you're going into a new situation, it's always scary. And there's always trepidation about what you can do and if you're going to be able to have any support in such a new situation. But when we work together and we reach out to people who are younger than us or less experienced, then it really makes a difference. So Elisha has been a great example for me in that way. And I'm already thinking of how I'll follow in her footsteps and what kind of change I want to make.
Perfect. Thank you to you both. I'm so inspired by both your just leadership and like the way that you articulate things. Like honestly, like looking back personally, I can't even articulate the way that you guys do, like your thoughts and notice right now. So I'm incredibly inspired. And I'm going to send this conversation to my friends and say, hey, these two amazing people are 16 and 17. Make sure you follow up.
Thank you
absolutely.
so much.
Absolutely. And so the next question is, so Gen Z has some of the highest rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide. The impact of social media plays a role in mental health. What are your thoughts about social media and its impact on our mental health?
Can I take that?
Yes. This one first? Go ahead.
I'm very passionate about this topic. So as a person who has struggled with mental health issues before, and coming from our family line where we've all experienced like depression,
anxiety and depression,
things like that. We also have PTSD in our family and different things like that. I think it's important to make it more aware, because isolation is a really powerful tool used in the media, is believing that you're all by yourself and that you can't do anything about it, that you don't know, you can't see anyone like you out there. So it's very easy to feel like, well, I'm the only one going through this, because you don't see anyone publicizing, oh, I go to therapy once a week, or, oh, I have anxiety, or, oh, I suffer from PTSD in the media. When you look at influencers particularly, but also people, just regular people out there on social media, it's usually glitz and glamour and look at how great my life is, because that's really what everyone wants to show on social media, is they want to show the beauty, but not really the really gritty moments that are in life and that are inevitable, really, because everyone deals with sadness and loss at some point in their lives, but it's not publicized very often. So I think that's one thing that can be done with social media, is to make sure that you are willing to say, hey, I'm not having a great day today, or hey, can you ask, we like to ask for prayers sometimes from people, since we're very strong in our faith as well. So we like to say, well, hey, can you send good vibes or prayers or something like that, because we're going through something. You don't necessarily have to be like bare your soul out to everyone, because sometimes that's what people think you have to do. You can just talk about it very simply and honestly, and it can be short and sweet, but just so people know that they're not alone out there. And I think that's something, it's definitely a work in progress. There have been a couple things here and there, that campaigns talking about depression and mental illness, but I don't think enough has been done. And until people are just willing to open up about it, because I know that there is a level of shame and rejection that's associated with mental health as well, I don't think that there's enough change being done on the subject, especially for teens. When we're talking to our friends, it's not really comfortable to go and say, "Oh, hey, I started going to a new therapist this week," or even like, "Hey, I started taking my anxiety medication this week," or whatever it is. It's because you're afraid of like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna get judged for this. No one else can relate to this. They're gonna think I'm so weird," and then you get this fear of being a social outcast. As Gen Z, and as millennials, we feel the need to please other people, but also we feel the need to just conform and feel like other people. So we crave that social connection and that interaction, and we like having friends. And obviously that's a good thing, but it can bridge over into the unhealthy side of things, where you start trying to bury those emotions that you have and those feelings that you have. And then that makes your mental health problems even worse down the road. So I feel like starting the conversation with that as well, but also normalizing the fact that people, sometimes you need to reach to outside sources for help. Sometimes life isn't perfect. Sometimes people have issues in their family or in their work or in their school that need to be brought up. So I feel like that's something that can really be done. And also having that representation in the media, whether it's movies or TV shows or documentaries or talks like this that we're doing, it's so important and vital to say, "Hey, I'm going to take a break because I need to step away and I need to take a time to breathe." And also another thing that I was going to say is that social media is very perfectionist. So with seeing people having the glamorous lifestyle and seeing people who are perfect in our minds, we feel the uncontrollable urge to be like that. And as a recovering perfectionist, it's a work in progress every day to try to see and challenge really the beliefs that I have and be like, you know what? Perfection is unattainable. It just is. No one's perfect. Everyone has struggles, even if they're smiling from behind a camera, even if they have this whole setup. It doesn't mean that they're doing okay, and it doesn't mean that they really are perfect to the core of who they are. Everyone has flaws and faults. It's just a part of being human. So I feel like that's another thing that sometimes you need to know when enough is enough. I really admire it when sometimes we know people and they're like, "You know what, I'm going to step away from social media and take a week off because there's too much going on and I can't deal with it." And it's been really helpful to have that example as well. And sometimes I have had to take a step away from social media, stick to my business things on social media, but not like look at the news or try to interact with anyone, just to protect my own sanity and my own well-being, knowing that boundary is really important as well. And our mom has taught us as well, like, hey, you know, if you need a break, we can take a break. It doesn't have to all be done now. You don't have to be perfect. Just do your best, because that's all we can really do.
Thank you. So for Gen Z especially, something that I've been really focusing on lately is the anxiety, the depression, the suicide, all those mental health issues. There are so many others, but those are the main ones, I think. And I think that we've gotten better as a society, especially with Gen Z. I think Gen Z is very awake in ways that generations before haven't been. But there is still that stigma and that discomfort around the mental health. I feel like a lot of people are going to say, "Oh, I'm depressed, haha," but not really anything beyond that, just joking about it. So I think that the best way to really spotlight that and shed some light on it is by not just joking about your mental health problems, but really talking about it in a serious way, and really talking about the things that you struggle with. Maybe telling your friends how they can support you through that, and being willing to let go of some people who won't. Because if somebody isn't there to support you through the bad times and the happy times where everything is good, then maybe it's time to let go. So, especially in social media, like you said, there's a lot of, glitz and glamour, all the great things, sunshiny days. And while that's wonderful to see, and sometimes that can be uplifting, if it's just that, if it's just smiles and rainbows, unicorns, influencers, I think that we lose that reality of life that, pets die, people die, um, things happen. All this Black Lives Matter has been really heavy because so many murders, especially George Floyd, seeing all those videos on social media, it was really, really hard. But we need to be awake at the same time. So just making sure that we have that balance between the positive and the negative, the good days and the bad days, and reaching out to the people that we see that aren't being open about what they're going through. Because everybody needs to have somebody to rely on when they're going through their anxiety episodes or their panic attacks or their depressive episodes where they can barely get out of bed and take care of themselves. And so if you see somebody who you don't know that they're struggling, but they haven't said anything, then it's important to reach out a hand, ask them how they're going, how they're doing, and be a voice, even if it's uncomfortable. Just talk about how you're doing.
Yeah. And if I could add one more thing quickly, it's such a relevant conversation now because basically everyone I've met has been going through a seasonal depression because of the quarantine and everything that has been canceled, especially for the graduating class of 2020. There are so many people that weren't able to walk for their graduation day, or prom was canceled, or anything that they really planned to celebrate or to feel that their accomplishment really has been canceled as well. So that is obviously very disappointing and everything. Being able to talk about how, yes, we're very grateful to be alive, we're grateful to be healthy, we're grateful to be here, but it's also okay to be sad sometimes. It's also a very important conversation to have.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I definitely agree that we need to instill a culture of authenticity in-person conversations. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen much. At least in my community, it didn't. People just reached out and say, "Hey, Bobby, are you okay?" Or, "Hey, Chris, are you okay?" That didn't really happen as much as I wish it did for many people, many of my friends. And so you two are insanely accomplished. So how can members of our generation, if I may say our generation, but how can young people get involved in our communities? How can they start? What are some advice and pieces of advice you have? Like how do they even start, and how do they pick what project to work on?
Well, I'd say one of the good things about being in communities is that you can always find some sort of group. So I'd say that's something that, as easy as doing a quick Google search for groups in your area, whether it's racism and discrimination you want to tackle, or if you want to tackle homophobia, or climate issues, or education reform policies. Finding a good group with teens, or being willing to start your own, because sometimes these groups don't exist. And it's always awesome if you do find a group. And I'd say if you find the group, cherish it. Try to contribute to those campaigns, to those debates, to the petitions. Try to do what you can. Since we are young and Gen Z generation doesn't have a whole lot of money, it's a little bit out of our reach to donate money to causes, even though we may want to. And I know we certainly do, but it's just not possible with the things that are going on right now. But I'd say reaching out to people who do have that power, that affluence, and the influence, the ability to contribute in an even more meaningful way economically, that's also a really powerful choice we have, is to reach out to those people, and just really finding a group and being able to be willing to go out there and do things, whether it's holding a peaceful protest, or whether it's calling state representatives, or signing a petition, or holding a rally, or holding a fundraiser, those different things. And I'd say to follow your gut when it comes to choosing one specific campaign or projects you want to work on, because it's when it comes down to it, it's up to you. It's up to what feels right to you. You don't have to go out to a protest, for example. If you feel unsafe, or if you feel like you would rather do something else and you want to stick to behind the scenes, that's fine. Stick to what you're good at, and also to what you want to do, what you feel passionate about. This is all about being comfortable, but also pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I love that. And I love this question. I think that it's important that we give people a way to start. So my biggest thing would be that our most powerful tool is definitely our voices. And our voices have been amplified like 1,000% through social media. And so really, it doesn't matter if you have like 0 followers. Use those hashtags, show up, because people are listening and people are looking and they care about what you have to say. And finding a group, but also finding a mentor. Because sometimes we look at people that we admire, or government officials that we admire, and we kind of think that they're unattainable, that we can't reach out to them. But I would encourage you, any young person, to reach out, because you really will be heard. People in power, some people in power are looking for ways to really reach out to this community. And I really encourage you to reach out, to send them a letter, send them an email, a DM, or whatever. Make yourself known.
Perfect. Thank you. I think that's advice that both myself and any other viewers, the younger viewers, can definitely take. Even the older ones can definitely take moving forward. And definitely, I'd like to re-emphasize the fact that social currency, like your social influence on social media, matters quite a bit. Let's make sure the movement continues forward and is sustainable. So we have about 4 minutes left. Is there anything else that we'd like to quickly discuss or share, and very, very shortly?
I will say that I love that you reinforce the social media thing. I feel like that's a power that sometimes is diminished. The older people will sometimes say, "Oh, those kids, they're always on their phones. They're always on Instagram chatting their people up." But we really do have an opportunity to make an impact. And especially as young people, we're the rising generation. And our future is now. We're literally creating the future, and we're seeing it unfold in our eyes, before our eyes. So we really do have impact, and we have power, and we need to take that power and use it for the good.
Yeah, and I definitely say, like, when you look at who teens and younger people are influenced by, we're usually influenced by our peers more than not. I know Elyssa and I, we have a lot of respect and admiration for our mom, but that's not really the case when you look at all our friends and things like that. They usually focus on what their friends are telling them, and they listen to their opinions. So I'd say it's a very unique position that you're in if you are a younger person, is that you can make a difference and really speak out with it, and have that influence, because your opinion really matters. So I'd say being willing to have those conversations with your friends, and there's so much that we can do, really. And I have so much hope for the future, and so many dreams that I hope that we'll all be able to enjoy the same sense of equality, but also that our whole world will change for the better.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much to both of you, Elisha and Elyssa, for joining me today and giving me the honor to really facilitate this conversation. I learned so much. I'm going to reflect on our conversation for the next week, perhaps. But,
thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
We really appreciate it. This is a true honor.
Yeah, so thank you again for being part of the C.R.I.E.S Concord movement and for lending your voice to drive change. For those of you who are watching at home, please share this live link and join the movement by going to criesconcord.com/join. The link will be in the comments. In the meantime, we encourage you to do your part to drive positive change, like our young people right here. Thanks again, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.